Hello again and welcome back to our course on PSE 15. I'm now going to start PSE 15. Exactly what happens at the beginning will depend on a number of things, one of which is the current situation regarding my device. Now what I mean by that is that in my particular situation I already have PSE 14 installed as well as PSE 15 on this device. Now the reasons for that will become apparent a little bit later on, but you can see down here on my taskbar that I have a little icon that I use to start PSE 14. If you're starting PSE 15 on a Windows 7 device, you might well start it from the start menu, although of course you may already have added a shortcut to the desktop, for example. And on a Windows 8 or 8.1 device, you may already have added a tile to the start screen and be using that to start PSE 15. On a Windows 10 device, what I'm going to do is to just type in here Photoshop Elements 15. As I start to type, you'll see both Photoshop Elements 14 and Photoshop Elements 15 appear there. I'm going to go for Photoshop Elements 15. This is the first time I'm running this on this particular machine, so I'm shown the Adobe Software License Agreement, which I need to read and accept. I have, of course, already read it. Now what happens is that I get this start screen. And this start screen gives me a choice. Basically there are three options. I can either start the photo editor, which is part of PSE 15, or the organizer, which is the other part of it, or I can start the video editor, which is Premiere Elements, if I have that installed. Now from now on I'm going to try not to mention Premiere Elements and the video editor again. I'm really only going to talk about the photo editor and organizer. Now I'm going to talk more about this start screen later on, but for the moment let's just start the photo editor. Now the first time you run this, you'll get that message there about sharing information with Adobe, about how you use the Photoshop Elements application. There are various aspects of security and information sharing, some of which we'll come back to later on, but for the moment read that, click on OK. Generally speaking, the first time that you start each of these applications, they will tend to be quite slow. They do normally get a little bit quicker later on. Now I have Photoshop Elements running, and one of the very first things that happens is that I'm told that there is a software update available. Now I'm going to talk about software updates later on, so for the moment I'm going to click on this and say remind me later. I don't want to do that update now because I want to talk about updates a little bit later on, so I'm just going to say remind me later. When you're running Photoshop Elements, you have quite a complex workspace, and early on in the course I'm going to be talking about this workspace and I'll be explaining all the different buttons and menu options and so on. But for the moment I just want to point out one particular thing, and that is that down on my taskbar I've now got another icon that indicates that I'm running the Photoshop Elements 15 editor. If I decided to run Organizer as well, I would have a second icon on the taskbar. They are two separate applications. The two parts of PSE are two separate applications. But what I'm going to do for the moment is just to exit. Now there are many ways of exiting. One of them is if I click on the File menu, the top left, I have an option Exit. Note also the keyboard shortcut there, Control Q, Q there standing for quit, and I've now exited. Now what I'm going to do is almost go through the same thing again. But this time when I see Photoshop Elements appear on the list, I'm going to right click on it and say Pin to Taskbar. And that has now put a little button on my taskbar that I can use each time to start Adobe Photoshop Elements 15. Note that it takes me to that start screen, and from there click on Photo Editor. Next time through it starts a lot more quickly. I suggest that you set yourself up with a shortcut on the desktop, or perhaps a shortcut like mine on the taskbar, because you will be starting and stopping PSE quite a bit as we go through the course. At any time that I'm using the Photoshop Elements editor, what I'll generally refer to as the editor, I may want to also start the organizer, and there's a button down here. If I click on that, it will actually start the organizer. Now again, this is going to be the first time the organizer has been run on this particular device with this installation, so it will take a little bit longer to start than it normally would. And the first message I get relates to a catalogue. I mentioned to you just now that I already have PSE 14 on this device, and in fact in PSE 14 I built up a catalogue of images. If you have an older version of PSE on the device you're running PSE 15 on, you may very well see a message similar to this one. What PSE will do, if I want it to, is to convert my existing catalogue to the current format. And I'm going to convert my catalogue a little bit later on. Alternatively, if I don't want to convert it, and I may want to keep it to work with my old copy of Elements Organizer, or indeed I may just have finished with that catalogue and be not interested in it anymore, I can choose the option here, No Create New. So what I'm going to do for the moment is click on the option No Create New, and I'm going to talk about converting catalogues later on. By default, when you start the organizer, you're given the opportunity straight away to start importing images. I'm not going to do that at the moment, although we are going to look at importing images in some detail quite soon. So at the moment I'm just going to click on the skip button here. I have a new catalogue, and the message in the middle there says no media available. Click import to add media. Generally speaking, the way that we use the organizer is to manage the images, and the way that we use the editor is to fix the images, enhance the images, and so on. At the moment I've got both the organizer and the editor running, and you'll see that I actually have both icons on the taskbar down here. One of them says Elements 15 Organizer, one of them says Photoshop Elements 15 Editor, and I can use the icons to switch between them. Or of course I can use any of the other ways of switching between Windows applications, such as the Alt-Tab approach if I prefer that. The two workspaces, the editor workspace and the organizer workspace, are very different because they're used for very different purposes, but they do have some very similar features. So for instance, each of them has a menu system in the top left hand corner, and from the menu system you have some common features such as exit and certain other options that are common such as help. And with either or both of them you can close them using, in the case of Windows, the standard Windows buttons at the top right hand corner. So if I want to close the organizer, all I need to do here is to click on the close, and the organizer is closed. Note that the icon on the taskbar has gone, and if I go down to the taskbar where it still says Photoshop Elements 15 Editor and right click in Windows 10, one of the options is Close Window. So I've now closed both of the programs again, and I'm once again going to start them. So I'm going to click again on the button there, Adobe Photoshop Elements 15. I'm back to this screen. This is actually called the welcome screen, and you may well leave the welcome screen there, or you may decide that whenever you start PSE 15 what you really want is by default to either go into the editor or the organizer, bearing in mind that it's pretty easy to start the other one or switch to the other one once you've done that. But if you go up to this icon, what's called the gear icon, and click on the gear icon, on start, always launch, you can specify whether you want the welcome screen to start, the photo editor to start, or the organizer to start when you start PSE 15. I'm going to stick with welcome screen, but how you have yours set, of course, is entirely up to you, and I may change this later on depending on which of the two applications we're working on. So you can set that to suit your own requirements. When you finish, click on Done. You've done with gear. And for the moment, that's it. In the next section, we're going to take a look at help. So please join me for that.